everyone, thanks for watching this video about visible mending. We have some visible mending kits out in the library that you can pick up, and this is basically a technique that you can use to give your clothes a second life. So compared to regular mending where you're trying to hide your stitches and make it look like you didn't have to repair your clothes at all, visible mending is all about turning those holes and those tears into works of art by using different embroidery techniques. You can also use patches. So if you've gotten a kit, there's going to be some supplies already in the bag for you. If not, you can always just use what you have around the house. Chances are you might have some of these materials already if you like to craft. I'm going to go through what's in the bag. So inside the bag, once you open it, you'll see a couple of things. I'm just going to kind of spread this out here for you. There's going to be a piece of fabric, a little card that has a embroidery needle along with some sewing pins that are taped down. And then you'll notice this small embroidery hoop. This is a 3-inch size embroidery hoop. And then you'll also have some different colors of embroidery floss available as well. So if you don't have those items, you can always pick this up at a craft store. I'm using this embroidery hoop, but honestly, if you don't necessarily need to have this option. Some people don't even use anything to kind of stabilize as they're working. They just kind of stitch as they go. So this is more just as a beginner to give you some stability while you're trying to work on mending. All right, in addition to that, you'll want to make sure you have a scissors as well. All right, so let's get started with some of this material. So if you've watched our embroidery workshops in the past, there are a couple of different videos that we have on our YouTube channel that go through kind of the beginner steps of learning how to use different embroidery techniques. I'm going to link it in the video so you can take a look at that if you're new to embroidery as a craft. But we're just going to be using some basic stitches when we're learning how to mend our clothes. So the first thing I'm going to do is get my needle ready, my cloth, and then also getting my thread ready as well. So we're going to talk about how to first repair your clothes if they just have holes and you want to use some embroidery techniques. So I'm going to get my needle out here, and I'm going to get a piece of floss that I like. And I think I'll do some of these dark colors over here. And then I have that clothing item that I wanted to patch, or not patch, but fix right here. So this is a dress here, and you can see there's a few little holes right here that I wanted to fix. They're kind of noticeable when I wear this dress, and so I just wanted to cover them up using some different embroidery techniques. So you can kind of see I just have 2 holes, like right here and right here. But I was thinking I would probably do some kind of embroidery pattern design to kind of do it kind of around this collar to kind of make it to cover up the holes, and then also just make it look pretty. Because this is a very basic t-shirt dress here. All right, so let me go ahead. I'm going to get all of this ready. So the first thing you're going to do is get your embroidery hoop ready. So when you get your embroidery hoop, there is this little pin up at the top, and there's 2 little pieces for your hoop. So you're going to basically undo this by moving this pin and loosening it up, and that will let you start to be able to take this inner hoop out from the outside hoop. All right, so now I have both these here. And so when you're ready with your fabric, basically what you're going to do is you are going to get your inner hoop in, kind of get this around the holes that you're trying to take care of. So I'm going to actually focus on this one first. This one's my bigger hole, and kind of get that in there. And then I'm going to take this outer hoop and kind of just push it around my inner hoop. And then kind of get that together. There we go. Then you can tighten up your hoop by moving the screw again up at the top. And I'm doing it the wrong way. So we'll just tighten that up, and then you'll just want to make sure that your fabric is staying there very stable, so that there's nothing in there that will move around. All right, so I've gotten my fabric attached to my hoop here really nicely. It's nice and secure on here, and I don't feel like the fabric is gonna like move too much as I'm trying to stitch. So the next step now is to get your embroidery needle and then thread some floss. So I have some colors here that I like that I think will go well with this this dress. So I think I'm gonna do some combination of things, and maybe do like a flower kind of design or something like that. Now, for you, if you're wanting to do this, you can always just kind of freehand and just like, you know, just stitch what you feel like as you're going along, which is kind of what I'm going to do. Or what you can do is kind of design what kind of pattern you're wanting to do. So you can always use a pencil or one of those transfer pens to kind of have your design on the cloth first, and that way it's easier for you when you stitch, which I'd recommend doing if you're a beginner to embroidery, just so that you know kind of what you're wanting to do. Otherwise, if you want to kind of freehand it, that's also fun too, especially since this is, you know, just mending and you're kind of just being creative. It's up to you what you would like to do there. All right, so I have my embroidery floss here. I'm gonna actually keep it at this size, but if you wanted to have thinner threads as you're working, let's say you're trying to really do an intricate design, you can always pull these threads apart. There's 6 strands that come with each embroidery floss, so you can kind of whittle it down to a smaller size if that's what you want. For me, I'm gonna use the bigger one just because I just want to fill in these stitches a little faster. So that's what I'm gonna do. And then I have my needle. Each needle has a little eye right here that you can thread the floss through. All right, so I have my embroidery thread and needle already. So you can see here I have just kind of this little bit on threaded through the needle, and then I have the rest of the thread here, and it's all cut and ready to go. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the back of our fabric, and that will be kind of our starting point. And what I'm going to do is something called a satin stitch. So a satin stitch is this kind of stitch that is really good for anytime you have to fill in something. You can cover a lot of room with that, and it looks really nice and clean after you're done. So that's what I like to do sometimes for holes. Just because it'll cover up that hole with something that's more durable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of start here, and I'm going to go from the back of my hoop and kind of poke it through kind of where I want this. So you can kind of see where my needle is starting to poke through. And then you're going to kind of bring your thread through on the side, and you're going to kind of hold on to it in the back. So you're just kind of keeping hold of that tail. All right, and then I'm just going to bring another stitch and kind of cover where I need it to go. So I'm just going to kind of cover the middle part because this is going to be kind of a circle that I wanted to create. And I wanted to make sure it kind of covers through. So I got that through on both sides here. And now I'm going to go back in, and I am going to get in on the other side. next to the line that I already made. And this entire time I'm holding the tail of my fabric. I'm gonna get in as close as I can to the other side of that thread. And as I'm going through, it's covering up that hole right here. And if you notice that there are some gaps or things like that, you can always kind of go in the middle and cover that up if you needed to. The nice thing about embroidery is that it is very forgiving. And so you can always do something like that and it can look like, you know, it was part of the design already. So I'm just going in, doing some stitches to kind of cover up that hole, making sure it looks nice and covered. I'm trying to make a circle, so that's why the sides of this are kind of going smaller as I go through. All right, so I'm done with the circle kind of shape that I was trying to create here. So you can see it's pretty covered. There's no sign of that hole that's left. And then there's this little tail right here that's left. And then I have, of course, all this leftover thread. So what we're gonna do now is clean up our stitch so that we can start putting in the other color that we're gonna do. So you're gonna take your scissors and we are gonna basically cut a little bit of that thread. So now I have two little tails here. And then basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna kind of split up that thread right here. So, and like I said, each embroidery floss is made up of a bunch of thread. And so you're just going to split it up and then take those two strands apart and then kind of just knot it basically. So I just kind of pull down, make a knot, and then try not to get that other tail trapped in between. Pull it apart, do another knot, and then you want to do this as many times as you think you need to make sure that it's nice and secure, especially with those smaller threads. Like if you're doing just a few, you'll probably want to have tied this together like a few times, whereas with the bigger ones, if you're using like the whole embroidery floss rather than splitting it at all, you might not need to do as many. So with mine, I just did it maybe like 4 times just to be safe. And then you can cut off a little bit of that tail and then you'll have just a little bit left over here. So I'm going to do the same thing over here with my other side. All right, and then I'll cut off with my scissors part of that there. So you can kind of see here how this ended up looking in the inside. And then this is what the front of my design is looking like right now. So from here, I can just, you know, do more things with my shape. I could turn this into a sun or like a little starburst pattern, or I could turn this into a flower. I think I'm gonna probably do a flower real quick, and so we'll do that. All right, so this is the finished flower design that I have for my what I use to cover up the hole. So from now I can just kind of flip over my stuff. I'm going to finish out just like we did before by cutting the thread and then tying it into knots. All right, so I just finished cutting and knotting everything up off camera. So everything is looking good on the side. I could cut this down a little bit closer to the knots if I wanted to. One thing about those knots, just make sure that they feel very secure, since you know you'll be probably washing these clothes and things like that. And then from here I can just take out my embroidery hoop by loosening up the screw. Just pull it out a little bit here, and then you can see here, this is what it looks like. And there's going to be kind of a faintness here with the embroidery hoop because we were, you know, using it for the fabric. You know, once you iron it and all of that, you should not be able to see that here. So now I just have this tiny little flower, and then probably what I'll do when I finish up my other holes is maybe put like a couple of other flowers kind of here around the collar, just so that it doesn't look kind of like too like out of place as I'm doing that. But yeah, I like how that looks, and I think these colors really go well together. So that's one way that you can repair a hole instead. And now this hole is completely covered. It feels nice and secure, and the fabric feels really like that part is nice and thick. So I don't think that hole is ever going to cause me some problems again as far as it ripping up and getting bigger or anything like that since we patched it up. All right, so the next type of repairing that I wanted to show you with visible mending is patching. So that's when you take a piece of fabric, like a fabric scrap, and you use that to cover up a hole or a tear in your fabric or in your clothes, and then use that as another layer to kind of keep everything all stable and then still wearable, and you just basically stitch them together. So with this, you can also use something called fusible interfacing in between your cloth, like the clothes that you have the hole with, and then you put the fusible interfacing on top of that. Then you put the fabric you want over that on top as another layer. That adds another layer of stability for you. So if it's a pretty bad hole, that is always something you can do to kind of take care of that. So I have my shirt here. This is just a denim shirt that I have that got this hole right here. It kind of ripped apart, and then I think I didn't notice it, and so it got worse whenever I washed it. So you can see it's kind of frayed at the sides. It has all this extra string and things like that. And so what I'd like to do is, like, this is kind of like the collar, and I kind of want to have like a fabric patch like right here kind of covering it, because I think that'll just be like this interesting pop of color. And so instead of trying to mend it a different way, I think I'd rather do that. But you could always do embroidery on that, because that might look pretty cool for the collars to have some like different designs on here as well. It's really up to you and what you feel like with your clothes. So the first step I'm going to do is kind of take care of this tear, the hole. So you can see, like I said, there's a lot of frayed edges, there's these loose threads and stuff like that. So what I'm going to do first is clean up the hole. So I'll take my scissors, and then what I'm going to do here is just kind of clean up things so that these excess threads are not like all sticking out. And that happens a lot sometimes when you're working with different types of fabric. Like this is like denim, so that always has a bunch of frayed ends. All right, so I have my hole looking a little bit better. There's not all these loose long strings everywhere that will make that hole get even worse. You can even use something called fray glue on this as well. That kind of just keeps these edges together, and that way there's not all these loose threads running around. Since I'm going to patch it though, I don't really need to do a whole lot to try to clean this up. All right, so there's two different ways that you can patch this. You can either take your fabric scrap and lay it on top of the fabric, and that way you want like your patch to be on the top, or you can have your patch kind of poking through the fabric, kind of where you see little like designs underneath. My hole is kind of small, like as far as like how much is coming through. I think if I had gotten this, like if I had continued to wash this, or if I hadn't noticed it or something like that and it got worse, this would have been more of a gaping hole. And then I think that like putting fabric underneath would look really nice with that, because then you would see more of the fabric. But right now when I do that, it kind of looks like kind of weird, just because you don't get to see that much of that colorful pretty fabric, and instead you're just seeing these frayed ends. So what I'd like to do instead is put my fabric on the top of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut my piece of fabric into like a little square or rectangle that kind of covers that up but doesn't look like too weird. And that way that'll be like my interesting little patch right there. You can cut this into whatever shape you want, like if you wanted to do like something diagonal or like a different shape like a star or like a heart or something like that. You can always do that. It's up to you. This is your clothes and you can be as creative as you want. So I really like this fabric. I think I want to do like a spot that has some really nice flowers showing. So I'm going to cut this into a small square. All right, so now I have my fabric square cut into a shape that I like, and I wanted mine to be kind of small because I just want this to be a fun pop of color, not like something that's kind of like really like huge and super obvious. I just want this to be like something like, you know, people wouldn't even really notice when I'm wearing the shirt until it's like, oh, okay, cool. Just something random. So I cut it down to the size I want, and I want to make sure that it, of course, covers the hole. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take those sewing pins that were a part of the kit. So these are sewing pins here. You can use this for like quilting or when you're sewing. It helps you kind of keep pieces of fabric pinned together as you're working. So I'm going to pin this the way that I want this to actually lay on my shirt. So you're going to take this and you're going to pin from the top, and you're going to go down and then get it through the back, and then you're going to pull it back in there again. And then you can take another one and you can do the same thing and just kind of pin it in place. And where you put this is up to you. It's just really like you're going to be moving these around as you're working. So it's really just, you know, where you want some of that stability so that your fabric isn't moving around a ton as you're working. All right, and then I'm going to do one more kind of closer here. So I'm going to start on the edges first here. All right, so I've got my stuff here as I'm going, and I'm going to actually kind of work from this corner and then kind of go up, and then I'll move my pins around. So what you're going to do when you're doing the patch is you're going to use embroidery thread to basically attach this fabric to your clothes. And then you can kind of be as creative as you want with that. So what I'm going to do is probably do some different designs kind of across. So I'm going to probably do just something freehand as I'm working through. I want to try to use something called a running stitch. And that's basically where you just kind of have these long, like little, well, not long, short little like stitches that kind of go in lines. And you can do this however you want. Like I could do this like curvy kind of design and do something like that, or I could do like a bunch of them in a row. It's up to you. This is one of the fun things about visible mending, is that you can be as creative as you want, and you really get to make like your clothes into your own. So you can just do what you like, and if you don't like them, just pull out the stitch. It's super easy. So now that I have my fabric actually pinned here, the next step I'm going to do is get my embroidery needle ready. So I have my needle, then I have the thread that I want. I chose a white to be kind of a contrast to the fabric colors. But if you wanted to, you could do something that was like a part of the fabric colors already, like a nice blue or bright red. It just depends on how much you want everything to pop. All right, so I have my thread, and then I'm just going to basically just thread it into the eye of my needle. All right, so I've threaded it in. I have this little part here that I'm keeping a hold of, and then the long part of my thread. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in from the back side of here, similar to what we did earlier with the hoop. And then I'm just going to do some different stitches kind of over here as part of a running stitch. And you can do whatever you like. Some people, they like actually do a bunch of stitches to kind of attach the fabric there. And some people just do a bunch of running stitches over to try to like, you know, keep everything there. And you can even do a combination of colors too. Like I could do some things in white, I could do some things in blue, and that would probably look really pretty. So I'm just gonna do a couple of running stitches as I work. All right, and then just remember to keep a hold of where the end of your embroidery thread is and the back side of your thing, and just kind of hold it down with your finger as you're working, because you don't want that to be pulled up on accident as you're working here. All right, so there's my first little thread here. I'm just going to pull this nice and taut. I'm going to make another stitch. I kind of want a little bit of symmetry in what I'm doing, so I'm trying to make it match up with where I was before. And if you want to be more precise, you can always, of course, draw your design on your fabric with something like a transfer pen or like chalk or things like that, something that's easy to like wipe off once you're done, or you just have to put water on top to make sure that it goes away. All right, so I have some different things going on right here, and I'm liking how this is looking so far. I'm just going to kind of repeat that kind of pattern throughout this little area. I want to space it a little bit more. All right. So one fun thing is the style of embroidery. It's called sashiko, and I probably mispronounced that, but that is a Japanese style of embroidery that's been around for thousands of years, and they use it a lot for visible mending as well in their culture. And so that is a bunch of running stitches that they do in very, very precise patterns, and they're beautiful. I'm going to kind of incorporate some of that kind of style into this. I'm going to turn these into pluses by doing another running stitch. Now for running stitches, basically all you do is just pull the thread through. So you push it in on one side, pull it from the other, and then you kind of just bring it to the next spot and do that. And you kind of do it in a line. So now I have these little X's on my design that I like. Oh yeah, I like that. I like how that is turning out. And you can do whatever you like with this one. Like you don't have to do running stitches. You can use any other kind of embroidery techniques as you like. And if you ever find that you found a stitch that you didn't really like, you could always pull that one part out. So like for example with this one, if I don't really like how that X turned out, or the plus sign, I can pull out that last stitch. Yeah. All right, so that's how this is looking so far. And I like this because it's like not very like obvious. It's kind of subtle, the style of it. but there's so many stitches on here, it's really adhering this fabric onto my clothes. So I know when I wash it and things like that, it's going to stay on here. All right, so this is how my patch ended up turning out. I just did a bunch of different stitches over here kind of randomly to kind of keep everything nice and secure. And I really like the way that it turned out. It has some variety there. And then if you think about it, when someone is wearing it on their collar, like I don't think it'll be like super noticeable. So I like how I think this will end up looking. So to finish it off, I just tied all of my ends of the embroidery thread, made sure to cut them down so they're nice and secure. And then from there, you can just, you know, wear your clothes and then wash them. You just want to be careful when you're washing them. Maybe do like a gentle cycle whenever you're doing this. All right, but then that takes care of that little hole and you don't even see it, and now it's like even better because it has this cool design on it. All right, so that was everything I wanted to show you guys. I highly recommend, if you haven't done any embroidery before, to watch our embroidery tutorial that's on our YouTube channel. I'm going to link to it in the description below, but that goes through a lot of different basic stitches for embroidery, and so as you're trying to figure out, you know, what you want to do with your design, that's going to be a great way to kind of learn some of those different ones, because we go through different things like the running stitch, satin stitch, the French knots, things like that, that'll really make your design look really cool. I also wanted to recommend that if you're interested in visible mending, that there are a lot of different things that you can find on Pinterest, on Instagram. On Instagram, if you do just hashtag visible mending, you'll see a lot of different people that have done this before and their designs and what they did. So that's a great source for inspiration. And then also, if you liked this video and found it to be helpful, or you liked working with this kit, make sure to give a like to the video. That way we know, as we're creating more things and more craft type take-home kits for everyone at our library, we know what you like and if you'd like to see more of these kinds of things. But thank you again for watching, and I hope you guys have fun being creative.